What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about American Horror Stories Episode 7, entitled Game Over, in which we're finally going back to Murder House again, after going back again, after going back again, after going back again. Like every single review for this channel, we're going to be getting into everything that happens, so spoilers. But because this is the very first season finale of American Horror Stories, I'm going to switch it up a little bit, in which I'm going to go over everything that happens, but then we're going to be talking to Dallas over at Deadass Serious to get his thoughts and opinions on everything that we saw in this episode, because there's a lot. Anyway, getting off into the very start of the episode, we are treated to two super fans of American Horror Story who have gone around and stayed in places from American Horror Story, and now they're finally going to be able to stay in Murder House itself. And right from the get-go, who knows what's going on? Super meta. But then they're swiftly killed off by Twisty the Clown and Bloody Face. And then, okay, still super meta, but we understand exactly what's going on from there, because it then turns out that the character Michelle is trying to make a video game for her son because he really likes American Horror Story. It's his favorite show. But she hasn't watched any of the show. I guess she just went on Wikipedia and started creating things based off Murder House because she wanted to connect with her son instead of, just watching the show. Anyway, her son just blows up on her, says that she doesn't connect with him in any real emotional way, and just leaves to go stay with his dad. And then this woman's idea of just how to connect with her son is to just simply binge the first season of American Horror Story, then go buy Murder House, which it shouldn't really be on the market given the first two episodes of American Horror Stories. It always felt like Scarlett was the one still paying off the house because her dads did it. She was rolling in the money in some way, somehow supplying, all the phones, technology, food for all the ghosts to eat based off the second episode. It gets really weird, but whatever. The house is on the market, Michelle buys it, and then she goes to stay on it on Halloween nights of all nights, where she runs into Rudy and Scarlett, who then run into the house just to immediately take a bath with each other, which, okay. Then she immediately runs into Ben, who is just on a tear of crying and feeling sorry for himself, but she believes that this is Dylan McDermott from the show that she just watched. And she plays into this without realizing that any of these people are just not the actors that they were portrayed by in this show that exists in this reality, but also the characters and the people that they were portraying. It's like I said, this gets super meta to the point where I don't really even know what's going on by the end of it, because it gets even worse. Anyway, the ghosts gang together, kill Michelle, and she comes back a year later to embrace her son on Halloween. He tells her that the only way to get rid of all these ghosts is to burn down Murder House, so he goes down there the next day, burns it down, and all the ghosts are free. The most compelling thing about all of this is that Rudy does not want to leave Scarlett. She doesn't want to be, gone in the ether, not being around Murder House anymore and being able to see the love of her life. And all these ghosts stop her, including Dylan McDermott. And there's this underlying situation that kind of confirms everything that we've been saying for the last couple of episodes, that because of the ending of Apocalypse, all of everybody's happy ending for Murder House just never happened. And we're just kind of left on that. And even though the episode does its best to burn down Murder House, create condos in its wake, and make sure to say that all these ghosts have moved on and there's somewhat of a happy ending, then it has to throw another curveball to say that no, that was all part of the video game, and Michelle's son loves the video game, wants more connectivity between this and everything American Horror Story, and yeah, I don't know, I'm a little bit dead inside. So with all the spoilers and just the general breakdown of the episode out of the way, I have with me here, because this is the last episode of the season, and there's just a lot to talk about, guys, I brought on Dallas from Deadass Serious. Man, why don't you say hello?
What's going on, everybody? Well, I thought I was happy to see Murder House go, but, let's go ahead and talk about it.
Oh, that's a really good place to start. Okay, so because we already went through everything, I just want to start talking about the things that were good, the things that were bad, and things that were generally confusing about this episode, because there's a lot. And I was telling you as we were watching this episode, Michelle, I think that's the name of the character, she designed a game that she let her son play that allowed him, I guess, essentially to play a girl whose boyfriend is a two-pump chump. And I just don't understand it.
By design. Yep.
By design, because that's just the way the game was flowing. Because at that point, I don't think you have that much control over everything that's going on. And you might, everyone who's listening to this might think that is way too much of a nitpick. But I will argue that the entire episode is meta to a point that it almost begs the nitpicking. Again, that's all just a joke. I will go back and say that the beginning of the episode really bugged me, in the sense that you have these characters who are fans of the show, specifically fans of the show, and are talking about it ad nauseum. Like, oh my God, we went to you want to go to the Hotel Cortez, and I was dressed as Bloodyface and all this other stuff. And I was just like, oh my God, if this is the episode, I'm just I'm gonna stop watching at this point. Right. They picked it up pretty quickly to the point where it started to get interesting. But to me, that was a real low point, not only of this episode, but I think of the entire season.
And honestly, I get that it was like reference the episode in the beginning with everything that they were throwing at us, but I was caught off guard. I expected Scarlet and everything like that, so to get this whole other side thing, I was interested to see where it was going to go at first. It was like, oh shit, something different, and then she starts glitching out, and it turns out to be a video game, and even then I was like, oh shit, where's this going still? But yeah, once we started seeing more, picking it apart, I started picking while I was watching the episode, and just logic holes, it was easy to start poking in a bunch of things that we were seeing. But yeah,
if you just do me a favor, seriously, right off the top of your head, don't think about it too quickly. All the logic holes you can think of, and I'll fill in the gaps if you miss anything.
Okay, so just in terms of the levels of meta that we got into, nothing that we saw, first off, can be verified as any kind of a canon in the story or in the world at all, just because we don't know what level of reality this takes place on. We know that they watch the show, but in American Horror Story, they don't watch American Horror Story. So it's hard to know which layer of reality or which alternate reality this is taking place in. There is, which reality did the ball roll out to in the end? Why was it giving us 1 year later, 3 years later, if it was a video game? And at what point did the first trial run end and the second, version 2.0 begin? When I was thinking about it, it's like, okay, the whole episode was probably version 2.0, because she would have had to have gone through the first experience of her son telling her, you need to fix this and that.
So is her talking to her son and all that stuff that's part of the video game?
Part of the game, right. And he's like, well, the kid, blah, 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 talking about himself, but he didn't recognize himself.
Wait, so if Escape, does that mean the first two episodes
are a video game?
Are you Ruby?
Right.
Is that like because she's the only one who quote unquote escapes, or are you Scarlet? But Scarlet was already escaping, and she went back, and but the only one who with any agency that does anything is the kid. But he's pretty much off screen the whole time. It's
right.
No, that's weird. It gets really weird for me.
Why did only why was burning the house down one thing, but then they also needed to overcome their traumas and stuff like that? Why, if they burned down the property, was Kaya Gerber, why was she still able to stay, by choice? Now you can just choose to not move on like the dudes in Idle Hands.
And specifically, she says, not everybody wanted to go, but they all left, and I stayed because I wanted to stay. And it's but if everybody didn't want to go, then why did they go?
Right.
Why were you the only one who was allowed to stay?
Right.
Because you were in love.
Why are you the exception?
Exactly. I just want to jump in and throw a little bit more. You're getting real meta and real thoughtful with these, these inconsistencies. I was going to say something for one, she starts watching American Horror Story after having quit her job and made this state-of-the-art video game in her garage without knowing anything about it. Like, she was literally just, I guess, going on Wikipedia and being like, oh, all this stuff is generally connected to this television series. Let's do that. And it's like, maybe, I thought that was kind of a funny joke for the fact that, like, the beginning was so cringe because it was basically someone who knew nothing about it trying to act like they did. So good on them.
Right, thinking about it like that, like, it absolutely makes sense that Bloody Face and Twisty would be in a place that's inconsistent with where they should be because it was someone who didn't know the show who was making the game.
For sure. And then there's also the fact that in the streaming service that she's watching all the shows on, American Horror Stories is there. This is like something that's kind of weird, like, because you're using characters from American Horror Stories, but like...
Was Stories?
Yeah, Stories. You can go back and watch it where you see the shot of Rubber Woman and the murder house in the background, right?
Shit.
Like the iconic shot for this short. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It is like, I saw that and I was like, wait. Like, what is the logic of it? And I guess, like, you know, that's just like a design issue, but it was weird to me. And I know we're going off on here on minutes and minutes on dumbass shit, but the point there being, like, it's a weird episode. Okay, let's get off of this real quick. Things that you liked about the episode, because I think that there's a lot. I told you when we were watching it, like, Scarlett being back, I thought was a big sell. I mean, I really liked her in Rubber Woman. I feel like she was one of the best parts of it. And as you said in one of our recent videos, I like Ruby enough, but she's too close to being what Scarlett is, so it's kind of like putting a hat on a hat.
Right.
And that kind of undercut it in the second episode, but bringing them both back for this episode and the emotional connection they had really kind of sold the rest of the episode for me. I mean, as inconsistent as meta and dumb and everything is, that relationship and them not wanting to lose each other was the best thing there.
And honestly, like, do you remember how we had said, like, if they would have held off the second episode until the end, we could have had time to, like, digest the first part, and then we get into the next, you know, part of the story with that. I'm kind of, now that the whole season is out, I'm kind of glad that they put it's kind of like a trilogy of episodes where we got the first two early on and then we got the conclusion of it at the end. But I kind of like now that Kaya Gerber was in the earlier part of the season, because now we had time to digest that whole thing and, you know, came to accept her. By the time this episode rolled around, I was all about, you know, their relationship, what was going to happen. Was Scarlett going to die with her there? Like, I was invested in it enough to where it was like the things that I didn't like about it before were able to be forgiven. But yeah, typical fashion, you know, they pull that rug out from under your feet right at the very end there.
Yeah, and that does raise the question, like, is everything in stories part of a video game, or is that part of the story part of the video game? Because it's very confusing as to what is and is not the video game here, because we have Michelle's character going into Murder House talking to Dylan McDermott as if it is Dylan McDermott, right?
No, for sure.
And like, that's confusing, and I guess it's supposed to be a joke. And normally American Horror Story, when it does joking material, I laugh. The naughty list, hilarious.
Right.
Like, totally on the nose. I'm here for it every single day. That's one of the best episodes. In fact, I think, besides Feral, one of the second best episodes of this season. But this, I think, is trying to do too much too quickly. And it becomes more confusing than it is interesting or even funny. And it begs so many questions from people who've been paying attention for the last 10 years. Namely, what's the canon that's going on here? And how does this play into not only Murder House, but also Hotel and Apocalypse and everything else like that? I mean, there was like, and also like, if there's a reality in which the show is real, that people are watching it, like, does that matter? And why would they make decisions or have theories on how to cleanse souls when there's clearly examples of how to do that in Apocalypse and allow souls to move on? Like, wouldn't that be the jumping off point, especially if her son is, you know, like a rampant fan? Like, haven't you seen season 8, kid?
Right. Okay, so by that logic, every episode of American Horror Story is a documentary. That means that these people know about the apocalypse in this world. They know about the apocalypse having gone down, and they're completely fine with history having been reversed. And like it, this is what I mean about when you think about it too much.
In a sense,
yeah. By the end, you don't know if just the episode has no point or merit, because where the episode lands as far as a reality, you have no idea. You don't know if this is going to be, are we talking about this being an American Horror Story canon? Is this still in stories? Like, the ball, where did that come rolling out from? It just, I just prefer to think of it as a bubble episode.
And that's totally fine if it's a bubble episode. It does beg the question, as I know that you've harked on your channel from time to time, is we as fans didn't build the continuity of this show and make it matter. The creators of the show built the continuity and decided that it matters and you needed to pay attention. And now they're flaunting it, they're throwing it around, and they're not building upon it as they could have done with this series. I feel like one of the things people are harking on, and some of the disappointment with this particular series, is you either have to go full 180 and go, okay, everything is going to be completely separate, and these are just stories that we can't tell through a season. And we've gotten a couple of those with the Naughty List and Feral Ball, even to an extent. But there's been other things where you keep going back to Murder House and you keep living in this world, but there's no way that it can exist in the world that you set up in the main show. And that is a little too much, in my opinion. If you're going to go back to locations, that's fine. American Horror Story is a location-based concept for the vast majority of its run. You know, you have Murder House, Briarcliff, you know,
right.
the Hotel Cortez, all those things. They can have stories and characters. You can bring back actors to reprise their roles and do stuff like that. That's what I was excited about this episode. But you haven't really done that. And now you've thrown sand in the eyes of the first 2 episodes where you were trying to do that when it felt a little awkward to begin with. And that's what's weird about all of this. Maybe there's a middle ground where they could have told stories with the characters that we already knew in situations, just to explore the relationships more and figure it out. Especially with Murder House, after the debacle of Apocalypse, these characters did not get the send-off they did because of the change in time, and then you could go back in stories and kind of reconfigure that ending for everybody and make it right. But they didn't do that either. And so we're just kind of left in this weird state at the ending of this season where almost half of it either mattered or didn't matter, was part of a video game, and who really cares,
right,
happened, but in its own little bubble universe, is connected, isn't connected, that type of stuff.
Yeah, it's like I'm never going to watch it again, more than likely, just because I know how it ended and the fact that it doesn't matter. And, like, does it erase, like you said, does it erase the first 2 episodes? Like, because it links to it, or do you just kind of, it's its own thing? Like, it's too much of a headache to try and think about to even, you know, like, to even want to include it in what you consider canon. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. But I also think that I've been way too hard on it. I think admittedly so, but I've been way too hard on it. Let's end this by talking about what's good. Like, what was the best part of this episode, at least in your opinion?
I liked where the beginning was going when it was throwing everything left and right. There was the Twisty had shown up, Bloodyface was there, and I was still thrown off my guard because it was taking place in the real world. They were talking about American Horror Story in American Horror Story. It started off really strong by sweeping the rug out from under your feet right away. It was like I expected Scarlet and stuff like that from the beginning. So it was very much like, wow, this was kind of Roanoke in a way, where it was like taking it like a step back. You know, they broke the fourth wall in a way. And it was interesting to me up until a certain point. But yeah, not to...
What I didn't like about that, I'm not going... I know I said we're going to end on a positive note, but what I wanted to say on that, just briefly, is the ADR of Noah Cyrus saying, "Oh, Sarah Paulson's making fun of Roanoke, and it's so good." I was like, oh my God, kill me now. Oh my God, kill me now. Because that wasn't filmed. It was a long shot. You couldn't see their mouths moving. They put it in after because it made headlines where she said,
right,
with good measure, because most fans also say F that season. And
and they're wrong.
But it just, come on. Like, come on. Don't try to protect your integrity of your work through ADR line in your spin-off series that has had its ups and downs, even to the point where the one that they're defending, you and I specifically have argued, might be less divisive than the season playing out in front of our eyes. So anyway, what I will say, and I already said, what I will say or echo what I've already said, is that Scarlet coming back and the story between her and Ruby worked for me this time. I thought, okay, I get where they're going. I like their relationship. As you already said, we had spent some time with them before, so and I guess like absence makes the heart grow fonder. It wasn't entirely bad. I see where they're going with it, and I liked seeing that play out a little bit more. A little bit weird that every time she wants to talk to her, she gets into a bathtub, and the fact that she ran into somebody else's house and got in a bathtub immediately, even though somebody was following her. I know it's like a crowded house, but still, it's a little bit weird.
That's just her thing, man. She says fuck everybody.
Yeah, seriously, you're an assassin. You can do whatever you want. So yeah, that to me was the best part of this episode, and probably the only reason I will come back to this series if I want to go back to it. We know that there's going to be a second season. They already officially announced it, but it's still a little bit confusing to me because we have an announcement of a second season, but also an initial announcement that it's going to be 16 episodes, I believe.
It is 16. They ordered 16. We got 7. We're supposed to get 9 more. Season 2 technically is going to be the remainder of those episodes, so it's not going to be an extension past that unless they renew it again.
Yeah. And it's weird that they've already technically renewed it for a second season, but they're just calling something that they had already ordered another season. Right. It seems like
so what if they didn't renew it?
Seems that's the point. Like, it just seems like a technicality at this point, or the way it was written was weird. It was like, oh yeah, by the way, we still have like a season 1B
exactly,
and now we're going to have a season 2, but it wasn't worded that way. It's like, oh, we're going to get a new season because this was a huge hit, and I'm thinking, was it
right? Was it though?
Was it though? Anyway, guys, we're going to leave it at that. Like I said at the beginning of the video, please make sure to go down to the description section below and hit that link to go check out Dallas's channel. He's been covering American Horror Stories and also promises to be covering American Horror Story double feature when it drops next week. I think it's quite clear we can all say that is the more enticing version of American Horror Story as we move forward. But we'll see. Anyway, hope everyone's having a fantastic day. It's been real.